start with, I would like to thank the candidates, Dave Adams, Kate Watsobaugh, Steve McDonald. Running for public office is not the most wonderful experience that can be had by a person. I know this very well. So if for nothing else, thank them for running. These people, and Bob Lucas, who can't be here tonight, and he will have a statement read later, are running to be on the Conservation District. For those of you who don't know, the Conservation District is statutorily authorized as part of the Department of Agriculture, actually. And its purpose is to provide for the conservation of soil and water resources in this state. And that is what these people will be here to tell you about. There are 5 members of the board, 3 positions up this year, 2 in 2024. The 3 positions this year are required to be residents of the rural parts of Teton County, not the town of Jackson. We also have 2 reporters with us. Kyle Morey, is that it?
Mackey.
I can't read because I don't have my glasses. Kyle Mackey and Billy Arnold. They will be taking turns answering the questions. And which one of you would like to go first?
Billy's going to ask the icebreaker.
Okay, and we will start with Steve because the microphone is in front of you. Susan is the timekeeper, and she will let you know when you're running out of time.
Maybe stick it closer a little?
Now working? Now, okay, speak louder.
I'm Billy Arnold, I'm the environmental reporter at the News and Guide, and asking questions, not answering anything. Yeah, we're going to start off with just an icebreaker, and our question tonight, since you guys are an environmental board, is what place on Earth would you like to visit before it's damaged by climate change?
One more time, would you say the question one more time?
Absolutely.
Not so close to your mouth.
A little farther away?
Yeah.
Is that better? Okay, great. What place on Earth would you like to visit before it's damaged by climate change?
The only continent I haven't been on, well, I take that back, there are 2. But the continent I would like to visit is Antarctica, probably for obvious reasons. If there's going to be a major impact of climate change, there's going to be a lot of changes in Antarctica. So I'd like to be there first.
Ooh, that is a very tough question to answer. And my mind immediately went to all the various different places on the globe. But then it kind of returned to some places closer to us. And what comes to mind is California, coastal California. And just given it's an area, I mean, the entire state just ravaged by drought, facing wildfire danger and threats constantly. Acadia National Forest, the redwoods, living organisms that have lived the equivalent of multiple generations of human lifespans. So I think that's my final answer.
I've spent the last 30 years as a geologist, and so the rocks, unfortunately really don't care too much, but glaciers do. And so the places that I would like to see before too long would be places like Greenland and the Alps, but they're melting so fast I'd better get my tickets soon.
So Kate will be the person to answer next. Let me interject. I forgot to mention you all have red cards. And if there's a question where you would like to go over your time limit, just show a red card and we will let you speak, even if it's not your exact turn. We will work it in. So I wasn't sure if you knew what those were for. Okay.
All right. Thank you for being here tonight. My name is Kyle Mackey. I'm the news director at KHOL, Jackson Hole Community Radio. Our first question tonight for the incumbents: what do you consider your biggest accomplishments during your time on the board, and what do you still hope to accomplish in another term? And for newcomers, what would your main priorities be if elected to the board, and what would you bring to the board that it now lacks?
That's a good question. Thank you for it. I would have to say main priorities would be, water-based conservation and health and projects. I think there's a lot of this community that's pretty intimately acquainted with water quality issues. Residents of the Hoback area come to mind. So I think continued focus and dedication to water quality, watershed management, and water projects and research I would consider a priority. What I think I would bring to this role, I feel like there's a lot of people like myself with a similar age and background that would really enjoy and would seek out a volunteer opportunity like this one. Desperately want to and can't. And I've made some decisions up to this point based around public service to allow myself to be here in this position tonight, to hopefully be a voice for people like myself who can't necessarily make the sacrifice to do this kind of work and to participate in the way that a seat on this board would allow me to participate. So I hope to represent people like myself who just can't be here and have other commitments and priorities. Thank you.
Dave.
I started getting involved with the Conservation District back in the early 90s, trying to get an aquifer study funded with David Love. And then once they started on the board here in 2002, that was the time when fishery was first raising alarms as to changes that we saw there. So I'm most proud of the database we've been able to accumulate on Fish Creek and then later Flat Creek and everything. There's nothing really more important than a consistent, thorough database when it comes to dealing with DEQ and getting some of the solutions, put on the ground. So all in all, I'd say that's probably, one the thing I'm most proud of. The other thing would be the fact that we have assembled an amazing staff, highly qualified people, highly motivated, and we're able to retain them. And I think that's really critical for our success and for the continuity of our programs.
Well, I'd second what Dave said about the staff. The things that come to mind for me that we've accomplished in the last election cycle, Kate mentioned down at Hoback, the Conservation District was instrumental in getting that nitrate problem in front of the public, and the last information we have is that it's pretty certain that a water district will be formed down there. Carlin Gerard was a facilitator and a moving force, and therefore the Conservation District. We've also done a lot of work in fire prevention, in wildland urban interface, and we participate with in all of our program areas. I could go into costs and the amount of money we spend that you contribute to us with the tax, but I see the time flag is up, so we'll go for the next question.
You have 30 seconds.
Yeah. You get the drift.
In the Conservation District, they're conservative. Billy.
Well, thank you. Is this good?
Yeah.
Microphone, great. So in July, Jackson water users used a record-setting amount of water. That was, especially at night, to irrigate lawns and in the middle of an ongoing drought. Through programs like the Trout-Friendly Lawn Program, which you all are part of and do a lot of work with, the Conservation District often finds itself in the position of encouraging behavior changes with the public, whether that's related to water use, wildfire risk, etc. But the question is, can and should the Conservation District be doing more to recommend specific policies or regulatory changes for issues like water use, water quality, etc.?
One of the really amazing things about conservation districts in general is they've kind of stayed true to their original purpose. The whole movement was started during the Dust Bowl with the acknowledgement that the best way to get farmers to change practices was not by regulating them, but by providing them with information, technical assistance, and some funding. And that's what I think has allowed the conservation district to be successful in all the things that they've done, is that they're basically and fundamentally an incentive-based educational and assistance program. So yes, it would be tempting to be able to suggest ordinances and regulations, but we have plenty of elected officials that do that. Our role is to get them the best scientific information we can, and preferably have that ready when the problem arises, and not, start scratching around trying to find things out, at the last minute. So I would say, all we can do is redouble our efforts to keep the science current and accurate, and always be there and willing to assist policymakers in making their decisions.
Unfortunately, I don't have much else to add to that. I'm totally in agreement with what Dave has said. We're not a policy-setting organization, nor are we a regulatory organization. But we assist, we provide data, we facilitate. And the amount of work that we're doing in water conservation now contributes to that. But I think the question on setting policy really needs to go to policymakers. The Conservation District is always willing to help, but that's not our purview.
I would have to say I'm kind of in agreement with each of these gentlemen in some sense. Not having worked in conservation or biology or ecology, but just my own life experiences, I would agree that people respond better to education and outreach than they do regulation. And I could see there being maybe some room to expand the outreach and education materials or messaging that could be potentially generated by the Conservation Board. When I started looking into this position as an opportunity to, for myself, an entity to participate in and work with, I was so impressed by the amount of partnerships that the Conservation District has. And I, to me, doubling down on those, using those partnerships, their outreach and messaging platforms, just to expand, information, educational materials, raising awareness, is maybe a direction we could take things.
Yes.
This is not a rebuttal. It's to follow on what Kate said, and it's not really an absolute answer to the question. It's more of a plug. Fairly soon, you will see a publication put out by the Conservation District and other nonprofits in the Valley called the Mountain Neighbor Handbook. It is a really classy publication that will be used to educate residents, and especially new residents. And one thing in there is the best way to water your lawn. So, not a rebuttal, but just watch for that. It's more of an advertisement.
Next question, please.
Okay. So this summer, the Conservation District decided to reduce the mill levy it collects as part of the county's property taxes, which I understand is only like 1/100th of the average local bill, so not a lot. I'm sure folks might want to know in the audience tonight. But is it possible for the district to hold its budget flat for future years and still accomplish everything it needs to do?
We reduced our mill levy from 0.8 to 0.6, our request for this year. realizing that that reduction would not reduce the amount of money that we received. So our revenue from property taxes will be about flat. We are spending on the order of $2 million a year. That, well, a little more, but $2 million about comes from property taxes. We have another 150,000 or so that come from other government entities that are passed through. And with the fine staff that we have, that is about the amount of money that we can efficiently spend. As inflation, we're in the first part of inflation, and a lot of our agreements with our partners are pretty well fixed for another year. We just didn't think that it was right to leave our mill levy the same and get a bunch more money that we couldn't spend efficiently. So we have the luxury of being able to raise that again as costs and stuff go up, but also property values may go up, and every year we have to evaluate. But we're not so fixed that we aren't going to do what we need. We aren't going to collect what we need that we can spend efficiently to serve the community.
While I can't speak to the viability of the budget question you raised, I think maybe as a newcomer to this conversation, it's maybe an opportunity for me to appeal to the voting public to approve that conservation district tax, because I think it's something that comes up every 4 years that maybe a lot of people don't think about or don't know what where that money goes, what it accomplishes. Maybe people are could be questioning that tax more this year or for the first time this year just because of property taxes in general and where they're at. So, but you know, the work that the Conservation District has done across so many areas that benefit this community, I'd say this is me. I'm in favor of that mill levy and hope that it's approved by you all again this year, so this important work can continue.
Yeah, not all conservation districts in the state have a mill levy. For instance, down Pinedale, their budget is determined by the county commissioners. There's two ways to get a mill levy. One is you put it before the voters in perpetuity, so that you would always collect it. The other one is the way we do it, which we come before the taxpayers every 4 years and have to justify what we've done. And I really prefer that way of doing it. You know, I think it forces us to, be transparent and really explain what we're doing. And so I would certainly hope that the voters renew our 1% mill levy or 1 mill levy, and as prices go up, we will probably continue to drop the actual request.
Village.
All right, this next question is about water quality. In a recent study that was partially funded by the Conservation District and Kelsey Rolling's study in Fish and Flat Creeks, found that human sewage was the greatest source of identifiable fecal bacterial pollution in Fish and Flat Creeks. But there seems to be some debate about where exactly that's coming from, whether it's septic systems, sewer systems, or something else. And my question for you all is, what work still needs to be done? What work should be done to figure out where that's coming from, or do we feel like at this point we know? And what role should the Conservation District play in that?
Kind of based on your question, it sounds like I don't know if we necessarily know. I mean, it's been identified, and this is probably an area where I need to educate myself further, but I consider that a pretty major disappointment that's, where our water quality is at certain points in this valley, places that we have a lot of contact and interface with, areas of recreational use, fishing, areas that are vital to our, the flora and fauna, the wildlife, our ecosystem. So I would consider that a pretty serious priority to take a deeper dive. I think the Conservation Board, supervisors and staff are in a position to, or already have funded grants that allow that data to be collected, and what we do with that data from this point, I think deserves some care and attention and some level of priority. And from there, I don't know what the next step would be exactly, but I'd say engaging the public pretty heavily in how we can all make decisions as individuals to help mitigate that, and how we can participate in our community and certain programs as well to mitigate it in a group effort sense.
So just stepping in as the moderator and the person who's a little hard of hearing, be sure to get the mic fairly close to your mouth.
Apologies.
Or not too close.
Not too close.
It's a Goldilocks zone, it's hard.
I'm no Mick Jagger, that's for sure. We did another study on Fish Creek about 15 or 20 years ago that was a little bit more precise, where we could identify whether it was from a septic or from a sewage treatment plant. This recent study was a little bit less precise, but it was also on Flat Creek, and we did see that there was human fecal DNA or in the waters. We have to remember that E. coli is a proxy for actual pathogens. It just suggests at a certain level that you might have pathogens, such as some of the dangerous forms of E. coli or Giardia or Histolytica. And some of the studies that we're now being able to test directly for these pathogens. And I think that's a direction that we're going to start moving in, to really try and identify the actual hazards that are involved. But we definitely have to continue to do these source tracking. As you know, most of the DNA that we find is from waterfowl and beavers, and not human. But it's something that we should continue to do.
Just in general, finding a point source is much more difficult than a general emission. So being able to track down the specific point is going to be very difficult. However, that doesn't mean we shouldn't look. Right now, the Conservation District is wrapping up a study of septic systems that's been running for about 2 years, where we've instrumented several volunteer septic systems from volunteers that we were able to take samples and basically understand how well those things are operating. So in order to find those kind of point sources, all kinds of studies like this can be done. I can't guarantee any perfect results on this is it, but we should have a report coming out within the next couple of months about the results of that. We spent 6 figures on it, and some findings are kind of surprising, not findings that, oh, this is a real problem, but just on operation of septic systems in general, and things that can be done in general to improve their effectiveness. Who's next first?
Dave is up first, and Kyle is asking the question.
All right, we're going to return to climate change. From a projected future of less snow and more wildfire risk to increasing thawing and crumbling of the Tetons, which Billy wrote about in the paper this week, I encourage everyone to read that story. We live in an area that will continue to experience more and more impacts from the effects of climate change. And we want to ask what role you believe the Conservation District, and specifically the board, might play or can play in helping Teton County navigate an uncertain future.
We've had a number of other studies ongoing, and as I said, the real key is to have a lot of years of data. And so we've partnered with the USGS for almost 16, 20 years now, doing snow chemistry and seeing, what the loading of that is. And we been assistance with NRCS on their snowtel sites. So we're constantly accumulating data. For the most part, I think it's a big challenge for any local community to really try and take on, climate change. Are you going to try and, we support a couple of nonprofits that are trying to reduce, our emissions, whether it's Yellowstone Clean Cities or, energy conservation works. But then there's a question of mitigation, which we are also very much involved with, whether it's, dealing with wildland urban interface and wildfires questions, as Steve mentioned. And as we get further into it, there's going to be a continuing change in water availability, especially groundwater. So I would expect that on those two fronts, we'll continue to play a very important part in getting information out to the policymakers and the public in general.
The way I see it in a community this size and where we are, mitigation is key. The climate's coming, overwhelming us. We're not in a microclimate that we control. So mitigation is what is going to make the most difference. And our partnering with other agencies and gathering data and making sure that that policymakers are aware of situations supported by good data so they can make the right kind of decision is the role a conservation district can play.
Okay, hopefully I'll find the sweet spot with the microphone on this one. More? Okay. Ooh, feels so close. I agree with both the gentlemen here. But I also, the conservation district doing the work that it's been doing and just continuing to double down with the partners that it has who are committed to the same goals, who are on the forefront of actions related to climate change. Those partnerships exist, continuing to build upon those. I see as something that's really important. The climate change game isn't it's not a short race. It's decades long. It's generations long. And something that I was so impressed by taking a deeper look at what the Conservation Board does is how many grants it funds for students. The next generation of scientists and, hopefully policymakers and citizens who can be part of the, solutions that I think we're really going to need. So committing continued efforts with some of those grants, student-based ones, I see as vital.
So I think we have time for one more question. I think it's Billy. Or you can fight it out.
Great. I think the last question will be about local agriculture, as that's something the conservation district works to support. I work with a range of farmers and producers. But earlier this year, maybe end of last year, the county commission did change some policy to allow landowners to have hoop houses on their properties, and that was something that the conservation district supported. But I guess my question is, what barriers are there to expanding local agriculture in Teton County, and what role should the conservation district play in helping local producers overcome this?
Who's first?
Steve.
Barriers to local agriculture, can I say weather? That's why we really supported the hoop houses. or high tunnels is another name for them. I'm on the Alta side, and in Teton County, the place where what I would call cash crops are grown, not meadow hay and not alfalfa to feed cattle, but actually cash crops are grown in Alta. And our biggest, the biggest issue for agriculture well, there's two, I think. One is having land policies that allow farmers to be economically viable and keep their land so that they don't succumb to that offer of $40 million for 10 acres so that it can be divided or turned into houses. The other is water. And although we have enough water in Alta, what we don't have is modern infrastructure to deliver it. Many of our pipelines were put in back in the 50s and 60s and they're rusting out. And it's an extremely expensive endeavor to replace those. And NRCS does not give grants for that. So we have to depend on the state, the conservation district, and the actual landowners. So other than weather, it's the pressure of economics and water.
My answer might sound quite similar to Steve's. Land managers and agricultural-based businesses are pretty central to our community and this area. And the pressure to develop, I'm sure, remains constant and heavy. So yes, in terms of policies that assist agricultural-based businesses, the conservation district as a resource for those, landowners throughout, all of these upcoming policies, land development regulations, whatever it might be, to be a resource to those landowners or agricultural businesses that I think are going to be really vital to, a sustainable food systems and, giving generational families the ability to carry out, their family business for hopefully another generation or two. So I'll stop there.
I'm glad you asked this question because, some people are kind of, wondering why we spend so much time worrying about agriculture in Teton County, which is, by dollars, pretty minuscule. But, we all should really thank the Lord that enough ranching families have decided that they really want to stay in it. I'm sure they question their own sanity, quite often. For instance, this summer, the Boyles Ditch off the Grove, which is diverted into Flat Creek, blew out. And a lot of people don't realize that without agricultural diversions into things like Flat Creek or Spring Creek, we would not have a fishery there. So there are so many ways in which agriculture is vital to the ecosystem here. One of the things you asked about barriers, is for grass-fed cattle. The one thing that would really help would be to have another federally licensed slaughterhouse in the vicinity. That would make a big difference and really allow for ranchers to expand their operations.
I started.
Oh, you did? Oh, my mistake. You're quite right. So now we come to the time where you each get an opportunity to make a closing statement, and actually we begin with Kate on that. And I believe Mr. Adams will then speak for Bob Lucas, who could not join us this evening.
All right. Thank you. As a lifelong resident of this valley, I'm the third generation in my family to be able to build my life here, and so I consider contributing to this community in some way a bit of my legacy. And I think a big part of this area's legacy is conservation. And I think a common reason people run for public office is because they're dissatisfied with current leadership, or they want to see things go in another direction. And uniquely for me in this case, it's the opposite. I actually see the conservation board, the supervisors and the staff as doing really incredible work and being such a well-functioning entity that I don't really want to unseat anybody. I'm essentially asking for a chance to give back to my community in a way that I think gives back to the people as much as it gives back to the place. And I see the conservation board as that. So thank you for being here. Thank you for listening to all of us.
I'll do Bob Lucas. Bob is very sparing with his words. But I will try and quote him verbatim. He says, "Our job is to spend the taxpayers' money wisely. I'm really glad that we dropped the mill to 0.6 and I'd drop it some more."
Thank you, Bob.
Thank you, Bob.
And the inflection was,
No, I could do it. No, I don't. But as for myself, I had the opportunity to spend the last few years serving on the state Wyoming Association of Conservation District Board, which is unusual for the rest of the state to have somebody from Teton County on the board. As they say, Teton County is not part of Wyoming, but you can see it from there. And it's really allowed me to see some of the challenges that the rest of the state are facing. And it's interesting that now a lot of counties are starting to have Teton syndrome. They're having rampant development, and a lot of them don't have planning staff, so they just have the conservation district do all the planning for them. So they're coming to us and say, well, what did you do about ponds? What did you do about this? And we're becoming kind of an asset for the rest of the state, even if it's only grudgingly. So thank you all for being here, and I hope you continue to have interest in what conservation districts do.
I've been on the board for one term, and I'm really consider myself a representative of the ag community in Alta. Alta doesn't get much play in Teton County. In fact, a lot of people say you can't get there from here, which some days is true. But I really am proud of the fact that we have an excellent staff, and we've done what I think is a very good job spending your money wisely. And I think any of us can continue to do that. I would like to say, please take a good look at that mill levy item on the ballot. We're doing what we think is the best by reducing it to 0.6, and I hope that you feel that we're taking your money and improving conservation in Teton County.
Well, thank you. I think they deserve it.